What if the most powerful weapon you will ever hold in your life is not a sword, not a gun, not even your words, but your silence, your growth, and your unshakable peace? Sit with that for a moment. Because everything you have been taught about dealing with enemies, dealing with people who hate you, people who want to see you fail, people who talk behind your back and smile to your face, everything you have been taught about handling those people might be completely wrong. APJ Abdul Kalam, one of the greatest minds this world has ever produced, a man who rose from the streets of Rameswaram selling newspapers as a child to becoming the president of the most populated democracy on earth, once said something that should shake every single one of us to our core. He said that if you want to shine like the sun, you must first burn like it. And the Stoics, those ancient warriors of the mind, they said something even deeper. They said that the best revenge is not destruction. The best revenge is massive success. The best revenge is becoming so good, so disciplined, so mentally strong, that your enemies become irrelevant. Not defeated. Irrelevant. There is a massive difference between the two. Defeating an enemy means you fought them. It means you got down in the mud with them. It means you gave them your time, your energy, your emotional peace, and maybe you won. Maybe. But irrelevance? Irrelevance means you climbed so high that when you look down, you cannot even see them anymore. They are still on the ground throwing stones. And you? You are in the sky. That is what this is about today. That is what we are going to explore together. Not how to fight. Not how to argue. Not how to clap back on social media or get revenge or prove anyone wrong through confrontation. We are going to explore something far more ancient, far more powerful, and far more effective. We are going to explore how ordinary human beings, people with real pain, real enemies, real struggles, can use the wisdom of APJ Abdul Kalam and the philosophy of Stoicism to rise so completely above every person who ever doubted them that the victory becomes automatic. And along the way, there is a story I want to tell you. A short but deeply powerful story that has nothing to do with kings or warriors. A story about a young farmer and a seed. Remember that story when it comes, because by the time this is over, you will understand exactly what it means. But first, let us understand something fundamental. Let us understand why most people fail at handling their enemies. Most people, when they get an enemy, react immediately. Someone insults them, they insult back. Someone spreads rumors, they spread rumors back. Someone tries to dim their light, they try to dim that person's light back. And the cycle never ends. It just grows. It gets more toxic. It drains more energy. It steals more peace. And by the end of it, both people are exhausted, both people are damaged, and neither one of them has moved forward. The Stoics called this descending to the level of your opponent. And they said it was one of the greatest traps a human being could fall into. Because the moment you decide to fight your enemy on their terms, using their weapons, living inside their emotional world, you have already lost. Not the fight. Something bigger. You have lost your direction. APJ Abdul Kalam understood this better than almost anyone alive in the 20th century. This was a man who faced rejection letters from the Indian Air Force. A man who was told he was not good enough. A man who came from a poor family in a small town, and had every reason to be bitter, every reason to fight the system, every reason to be angry at the people who doubted him. And what did he do? He studied. He worked. He built missiles. He changed a nation. He became the people's president. His enemies, if they ever existed in any real form, were never heard from again. That is destruction without fighting. Now let us talk about the story. There was once a young farmer in a small village who had a neighbor that despised him. This neighbor would do everything in his power to make the farmer's life difficult. He would redirect water away from the farmer's crops. He would spread lies about the farmer in the village market. He would laugh loudly whenever the farmer's harvest was small and celebrate privately whenever it failed. The farmer, for a long time, felt the anger building inside him. He wanted to confront this neighbor. He wanted justice. He wanted to fight. But one evening, his elderly grandfather sat beside him near the fire and said something simple. he said. Plant better seeds. The farmer did not understand at first. He said, But grandfather, that man is ruining my harvest. Should I not confront him? Should I not show him that I am not weak? The grandfather shook his head slowly and repeated, Plant better seeds. The ground does not care who your enemy is. The seed does not know about your pain. But if you plant better seeds, a better harvest will come. And a better harvest will say everything that your words never could. The farmer listened. Instead of spending his energy confronting the neighbor, he spent it learning. He studied the soil. He experimented with new techniques. He woke up earlier. He worked longer. He planted better seeds. 3 years later, the farmer's harvest was so abundant that people came from neighboring villages to buy from him. He had built a small business. He had earned respect. He had created a life that spoke louder than any argument ever could. And the neighbor? The neighbor was still on the same piece of land, planting the same seeds, living the same small, bitter life, surrounded by the weeds of his own hatred. The farmer never fought him. But the farmer destroyed him completely. That story is not just about farming. That story is about your life. It is about every single person who has ever hurt you, underestimated you, laughed at you, or tried to stop you. It is about every enemy you have, real or imagined. And the message is devastatingly simple. Plant better seeds. Invest in yourself so deeply, so consistently, and so powerfully that your growth becomes the answer to every person who ever doubted you. APJ Abdul Kalam once said, You have to dream before your dreams can come true. Notice what he did not say. He did not say, You have to defeat your enemies before your dreams can come true. He did not say, You have to get revenge before your dreams can come true. He pointed the direction inward and upward, never sideways toward the person trying to pull you down. The philosophy of Stoicism begins with one of the most radical ideas in all of human thought. The idea that you cannot control what happens to you, but you can always, without exception, control how you respond. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who was also a Stoic philosopher, wrote in his private journal, a journal that was never meant to be published, that other people's actions are not within your control. Only your own virtue is within your control. Only your own choices. Only your own character. This is the foundation of everything we are discussing today. Because if you accept this, truly, deeply, not just intellectually but emotionally, then the concept of an enemy transforms entirely. Your enemy is no longer a threat. They are a test. They are not a barrier. They are a mirror. They show you exactly where your discipline needs to grow, exactly where your peace needs to deepen, exactly where your character needs to become stronger. And here is the powerful thing. When you begin to see your enemy as a teacher rather than a threat, you stop reacting. And when you stop reacting, you begin to respond. And response is where all of your power lies. There is a concept in Stoicism called amor fati, which translates from Latin as love of fate. It sounds strange at first. Love your fate? Even when your fate includes people who want to destroy you? Even when your fate includes betrayal, loss, and failure? Yes. Especially then. Because the Stoics understood something profound. They understood that every single difficult thing that happens to you, including the existence of an enemy, is the universe training you for a higher level. Nietzsche, who was deeply influenced by the Stoics, said it plainly, What does not kill me makes me stronger. But the Stoic version goes even deeper. It does not just say that difficulty makes you stronger. It says that the right response to difficulty is gratitude. Not because pain feels good, but because pain, when met with the right mindset, produces a version of you that nothing in this world can break. APJ Abdul Kalam lived this philosophy without ever calling it Stoicism. When he was rejected by the Air Force, he did not spiral into depression or anger. He went and met a great teacher, Vikram Sarabhai, and began the journey that would define Indian space history. He took the rejection, took the pain, and alchemized it into purpose. That is amor fati in human form. Now let us talk practically. Let us talk about what you actually do, day by day, hour by hour, when you are dealing with a real enemy. Not a philosophical enemy. A real person who is making your life difficult right now. The first and most important thing you do is this: you protect your peace like it is the most valuable thing you own. Because it is. Your peace, your internal stillness, your mental clarity, your emotional equilibrium, is the foundation from which every great action in your life will come. The moment your enemy disturbs your peace, they have won a small but significant battle. They have entered your mind. They are now living in your head rent-free, taking up space that belongs to your dreams, your growth, your future. Evict them. Not through hatred, because hatred is just another form of attachment. Evict them through redirection. Every single time a thought about your enemy enters your mind, acknowledge it, then deliberately redirect your attention to something productive. This is not avoidance. This is strategic energy management. The Stoics called it prosoke, attention to what is within your control. And what is within your control is where you point your mind. APJ Abdul Kalam spent enormous amounts of time reading. He read voraciously about science, about spirituality, about the lives of great human beings. And in that reading, in that constant feeding of his mind with something larger than his immediate circumstances, he built a mental fortress that no external force could penetrate. He once said, "Reading ignites the flame of imagination." But reading does something else too. It removes the enemy from the center of your psychological world. It replaces them with ideas, with wisdom, with perspectives so vast that your personal conflicts begin to seem very small. This is one of the most underrated weapons in the arsenal of someone trying to grow beyond their circumstances. Read. Constantly. Read about people who overcame greater pain than yours. Read about philosophies that reframed suffering as fuel. Read stories of human beings who were so thoroughly destroyed by circumstance that their survival and success seem almost miraculous. And then ask yourself, if they could do it under those conditions, what is my excuse? The Stoics spoke frequently about what they called the inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius described it as a place inside every human being, a place of perfect stillness, perfect reason, perfect clarity, that no external force can ever truly reach without your permission. Your enemy can damage your reputation. They can damage your relationships. They can damage your finances in some cases. But they cannot enter the inner citadel unless you open the door and invite them in. And most people, without realizing it, hold the door wide open. They obsess over what their enemy said. They replay conversations. They imagine confrontations. They fantasize about revenge. And in doing all of this, they hand the keys of their inner citadel to the very person who wants them destroyed. Close the door. Lock it. Rebuild the citadel every single morning through your practice, through meditation, through journaling, through silence, through exercise, through prayer if that is your path, through any discipline that returns you to yourself. Because your enemy's greatest power over you is the power you give them inside your own mind. Remove that power, and they become nothing. APJ Abdul Kalam was once asked by a student what he should do about people who tried to discourage him from pursuing his dreams. And Kalam's answer was so simple, so devastatingly practical, that it needs to be said again and again. He said, "Look at the sky. We are not alone. The whole universe is friendly to us and conspires only to give the best to those who dream and work." That is a Stoic idea dressed in Kalam's spiritual language. The universe, life itself, responds to those who align themselves with growth, with virtue, with relentless effort. It does not respond to those who waste their energy fighting. Energy spent on an enemy is energy stolen from your destiny. It is that simple. Every argument you win with an enemy is a chapter of your success story left unwritten. Every moment you spend plotting revenge is a moment of mastery in your craft that you will never get back. And so we arrive at the deepest truth in all of this. Destroying your enemy without fighting is not passive. It is not weakness. It is not running away. It is the most aggressive, the most disciplined, the most demanding path a human being can walk. Because it requires you to channel all of that energy, all of that anger, all of that pain, all of that desire for justice, and redirect it entirely toward becoming the best possible version of yourself. The farmer planted better seeds. Kalam built better rockets. The Stoics built better minds. And you? You are here. Reading this. Listening to this. Which means that somewhere inside you, something already knows that the path forward is not through your enemy. It is through you. The warrior does not fight because they are afraid. The warrior does not fight because fighting costs too much. The real warrior trains. The real warrior grows. The real warrior becomes so formidable, so unbreakable, so luminous in their purpose, that no enemy on earth has the power to dim what they carry. That is what APJ Abdul Kalam was. That is what the great Stoics were. And that, with every single choice you make from this moment forward, is what you are becoming. Now let us go even deeper into the practical application of these ideas, because understanding them philosophically is one thing, but living them is another entirely. One of the most concrete practices the Stoics recommended was something called negative visualization. It sounds dark. It is actually liberating. It means deliberately spending a few minutes each day imagining the worst that your enemy could do to you. Not to terrify yourself, but to prepare yourself. To realize that even in the worst case scenario, even if everything your enemy is trying to do to you actually succeeds, you will still be standing. You will still have your mind. You will still have your character. You will still be able to begin again. Marcus Aurelius did this constantly. He would imagine losing everything, his power, his status, his relationships, and in that imagining, he freed himself from the anxiety of losing it. Because when you have already faced the worst in your imagination and survived it, the actual threats of your enemy lose their grip on your psychology. APJ Abdul Kalam, in a different but equally powerful way, practiced this through his relationship with failure. He spoke openly about failure as a necessary part of the journey. He said, "Failure will never overtake me if my determination to succeed is strong enough." That is not a denial of failure. That is a preparation for it. It is saying, I have thought about failure. I have felt it. And I am choosing to move forward anyway. There is something in Stoic philosophy called sympathia, the understanding that all things in the universe are interconnected. What this means practically is that the person who is your enemy is not fundamentally separate from you. They are a human being, shaped by their own pain, their own fears, their own unresolved wounds. This does not excuse what they do. It does not mean you should be naive or allow them to harm you without boundaries. But it means that carrying hatred for them is like drinking poison and expecting them to die. It hurts you far more than it hurts them. Kalam embodied this through his extraordinary compassion. Here was a man who had every reason to be angry at the systems that delayed his dreams, at the people who rejected him, at the world that did not immediately recognize his genius. And instead, he spent his entire life in service to others, particularly to the young. He believed that no human being was beyond hope, beyond growth, beyond redemption. And that belief made him untouchable. Because a person who carries no hatred, who has burned through their own bitterness and emerged on the other side as pure purpose, that person cannot be destroyed by ordinary means. Let us talk about the concept of legacy. Because this is where the real long game is played, and this is where destroying your enemy without fighting becomes most complete. Your enemy lives in the present. They are reacting to the present. They are threatened by the present version of you, or perhaps by the future version of you that they can sense coming even if they cannot articulate it. But you, if you are following the path we are describing today, you are not living in the present. You are building a future. You are laying the bricks of a legacy, one disciplined day at a time, one book at a time, one skill at a time, one kind act at a time, one moment of chosen peace at a time. And legacy is permanent in a way that conflict is not. The people who tried to stop APJ Abdul Kalam, if there were any, are forgotten. Completely forgotten. But Kalam's legacy fills classrooms and hearts across an entire nation and beyond. The Stoics who were exiled, imprisoned, even executed by their enemies, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, their words outlasted every single person who ever tried to harm them. Their enemies are footnotes at best. The Stoics themselves are studied, loved, and applied 2,000 years later. That is the ultimate victory. Not the victory that happens in an argument, or a fight, or a moment of confrontation. The victory that happens across decades and centuries, when the quality of what you built speaks so loudly that no voice of hatred can compete with it. Here is another practical point that comes directly from Stoic practice, and it is one of the most difficult to implement but one of the most transformative. Respond to your enemy with grace. Not flattery. Not weakness. Not allowing them to harm you. Grace. When they insult you, do not insult back, simply continue walking in your direction. When they spread lies about you, do not spend your energy on counter-narratives, let your actions speak. When they celebrate your failures, do not give them the satisfaction of seeing your pain, simply get up and begin again. This is not easy. It requires a level of emotional mastery that most people never develop because most people never make the decision to develop it. But when you choose grace over reaction, you do something extraordinary. You reveal the difference in your character so plainly that everyone around you can see it without you saying a word. Your enemy reveals themselves through their behavior. You reveal yourself through yours. And the world, even when it is silent, is always watching and always comparing the two. A.P.J. Kalam's grace was legendary. People who knew him personally spoke about how he treated everyone, the president, the peon, the scientist, the street child, with the exact same warmth, the exact same dignity, the exact same genuine interest. That grace was not a performance. It was the natural expression of a man who had done the inner work, who had cleaned his own house so thoroughly that there was no room in it for contempt. We also need to address something that many people feel but rarely say out loud. Sometimes the pain of having an enemy is not just about what they do to you. It is about what their existence means. It is about the fact that someone, a real human being who has looked at you, who knows you, who has seen your life, has decided that you are worth hating, worth undermining, worth destroying. And that can shake something very deep inside a person. It can make you question yourself. It can make you wonder whether they see something true about you that you have been afraid to see. This is where A.P.J. Kalam's wisdom is most necessary. He said, "Don't take rest after your first victory because if you fail in second, more lips are waiting to say that your first victory was just luck." And what he is pointing to there is a kind of psychological resilience, a refusal to allow other people's perception of you to become your perception of yourself. Your enemy's opinion of you is information. At most. It is not truth. It is not definition. It is one limited, biased, emotionally charged view of who you are, filtered through every wound and insecurity that person carries. You are not your enemy's story about you. You are the story you are writing with your own life, one day at a time. Protect that story fiercely. Seneca, one of the most powerful Stoic writers in all of history, wrote in his letters something that cuts straight to the heart of what we are discussing. He wrote that the greatest revenge you can take on an enemy is this: do not be like them. Do not adopt their cruelty. Do not absorb their bitterness. Do not mirror their smallness. Instead, and this is the hard part, become more generous, more disciplined, more compassionate, more focused on your purpose than you would have been without them. Let their hatred make you larger. Let their contempt deepen your wisdom. Let their attempts to destroy you become the very fuel of your construction. This is not a passive suggestion. This is a radical act of transformation. Because most human beings, when they are hurt, become smaller versions of themselves. They get angrier. They get more defensive. They trust less. They hope less. They open their hearts less. And their enemy, without even knowing it, has succeeded in diminishing them. But the rare human being, the one who has decided to walk the path of growth, does something completely different. They take that pain and they transmute it. They build with it. And the result is not just success. The result is a depth of character, a strength of spirit, a quality of inner life that cannot be manufactured any other way. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam's entire life was built on a philosophy that the Stoics would recognize immediately, that the greatest contribution a human being can make is not to themselves, but to others. That the life best lived is not the life that defeats the most enemies, but the life that lifts the most people. This is the final weapon in this entire arsenal. Service. purpose, contribution. When you are genuinely, deeply committed to something larger than yourself, when you are building something that matters, serving people who need what you have to offer, creating something that will outlast your own small personal dramas, then your enemy becomes genuinely irrelevant. Not because you have defeated them, but because you have grown so completely into your purpose that they simply do not fit inside your world anymore. They belong to a smaller story, and you have moved on to a bigger one. This is why you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Not as a formality, not as a number, but because what is being built here, this library of wisdom, this collection of ideas drawn from the greatest minds in human history, this ongoing conversation about how to live a life of meaning and power and peace, this is exactly the kind of thing that Kalam would have wanted. This is exactly the kind of thing the Stoics built their entire philosophy around. The transmission of wisdom. The passing of a torch from one generation to the next. Every single video on this channel is a seed. And if you plant enough of them in your mind, if you watch, if you think, if you apply, you will become the kind of person whose enemies are powerless. You will become the kind of person whose growth is unstoppable. You will become the kind of person who destroys every obstacle not through conflict, but through the sheer force of who they are becoming. Subscribe because your mind deserves the best food it can get. Subscribe because every week, this channel brings you another weapon, not of war, but of wisdom. Subscribe because APJ Abdul Kalam spent his entire life trying to light a fire in the minds of young people, and this channel is continuing that fire. Subscribe because the Stoics spent their lives building a philosophy that makes ordinary human beings extraordinary, and you deserve access to that philosophy in language that speaks directly to your life, your struggles, your dreams. Subscribe because this is only the beginning. The wisdom being shared here goes deeper with every video. The stories get more powerful. The lessons get more practical. The tools get more effective. And every person who subscribes is not just adding a number to a count, they are joining a community of people who have decided to rise above their circumstances, to grow beyond their pain, and to become the kind of human beings that this world desperately needs. 2,000 subscribers. That is the next milestone. And every single one of those 2,000 people will be someone who chose growth over reaction, wisdom over anger, purpose over revenge. If that is you, if you recognize yourself in any part of what has been shared today, then your subscription is not just a click. It is a declaration. It is you saying, I choose the harder, better path. I choose to plant better seeds. Let us bring it all together now. To destroy your enemy without fighting is to understand that the battlefield is not outside you, it is inside you. Every day, the battle is fought in the choice between reaction and response, between smallness and growth, between hatred and purpose. APJ Abdul Kalam fought that battle every day of his life and won it so completely that he became a symbol of what the human spirit is capable of when it refuses to be diminished. The Stoics fought that battle in the arenas of Rome, in the courts of emperors, in the dungeons of exile, and they emerged with a philosophy that has outlasted every empire that ever tried to silence it. And you, reading this right now, listening to this right now, you are fighting that battle too. In your family, in your workplace, in your neighborhood, in your mind at 3 in the morning when sleep will not come and the thoughts of what someone did to you will not stop circling. Plant better seeds. Build your inner citadel. Protect your peace. Choose grace. Commit to purpose. Serve something larger than yourself. And watch, not tomorrow, not next week, but over months and years of consistent, disciplined, Kalam-inspired, Stoic-powered growth, watch as the version of you that emerges makes every enemy you ever had irrelevant by the simple, devastating, magnificent fact of who you have become. That is how you destroy your enemy without fighting. That is the wisdom of APJ Abdul Kalam. That is the gift of Stoicism. And that, if you choose it, is your life. Subscribe now. You are one sentence away from losing everything you have built. Not your money. Not your career. Not your reputation in the way most people think about it. Something deeper than all of that. You are one triggered response away from losing your peace, your power, and the version of yourself that you have spent years quietly trying to become. And the person standing across from you, the one pushing your buttons right now, the one saying exactly the thing they know will crack you open, they are counting on you to forget that. This is not a motivational speech. This is not a collection of pretty quotes that sound good in the morning and disappear by noon. What you are about to read is a way of living that has survived wars, exile, slavery, the collapse of empires, and the most brutal losses a human being can endure. It was not invented by someone sitting comfortably in a quiet room. It was forged by people who had everything taken from them and still chose to remain unshaken. That way of living is called Stoicism, and once it settles into your bones, no one will ever be able to use you as a puppet again. There is a man most people have never heard of, and yet his story deserves to be told in every school, every home, every place where human beings are trying to figure out how to survive other human beings. His name was Cato, and he lived in ancient Rome at a time when Rome itself was tearing apart at the seams. He was not the richest man in the room. He was not always the most powerful. But he was the most unshakable. There came a day when Julius Caesar, who had already begun to tighten his grip around Rome, offered Cato a deal. It was a generous deal by any political standard. Caesar extended his hand in the kind of peace offering that men kill for: position, security, alliance. Cato looked at it and walked away. Not with a speech. Not with a dramatic declaration. He simply turned, because in his mind the answer was already settled long before Caesar opened his mouth. He had decided who he was before anyone tried to negotiate it. And that decision, that quiet, immovable inner decision, made him one of the most provocative figures in Rome. Not because he sought conflict, but because he refused to be moved by it. His enemies tried everything. They mocked him publicly. They questioned his sanity. They used the language of reason and pragmatism to make his stillness look like stubbornness and his values look like pride. And Cato simply continued living by what he believed, because he understood something that most people never do, that the moment you react to provocation, you have handed your enemy the thing they wanted most. Your composure. Your center. Yourself. That is the story of how Stoicism lives. Not in books. Not in quotes. In moments exactly like that one, where someone is pushing and something inside you has already decided not to move. And now it is time to understand how you can live that way too. The first thing you need to understand is that provocation is never really about you. Read that again and let it land somewhere real. When someone provokes you, when they make the cutting remark at the dinner table, when they undermine you in the meeting, when they send a message designed to destabilize you, they are not doing it because of who you are. They are doing it because of what is happening inside of them. Pain travels outward. Frustration looks for a landing spot. Insecurity needs company. And a person who is genuinely at peace with themselves has no reason, none at all, to walk into your life and try to disturb yours. This understanding changes everything. Because the moment you stop taking provocation personally, it stops having the power it used to have. The arrow still gets fired. But now you are watching it come toward you in slow motion, and somewhere inside your chest there is a stillness that simply says, "This is not mine to carry." The Stoics called this understanding the beginning of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled one of the most powerful civilizations in human history and still found time to fill journals with quiet reflections, wrote that when you wake up each morning, you should remind yourself that you will encounter difficult people, ungrateful people, arrogant people, people who will lie, manipulate, provoke, and diminish. And he did not say this to make you afraid. He said it so that when those people arrived, and they always arrive, you would not be surprised. You would already be ready. Readiness is not the same as armor. Armor is heavy. It slows you down. It isolates you. Readiness is something else entirely. It is the quiet knowledge that you have already decided how you will respond, long before the situation demands it. And that decision, made in a calm moment, will carry you through even the most heated ones. The second thing you need to understand is that silence is not weakness. It is the sharpest weapon in the room. When someone provokes you and you say nothing, the untrained eye sees someone who has lost. Someone who has been defeated. someone who could not find the words. But the trained mind, the Stoic mind, sees something completely different. It sees a person who has chosen not to fight on someone else's battlefield, using someone else's rules, at a time and place chosen specifically to put them at a disadvantage. Think about what happens in the body of a person who provokes. They lean forward. Their pulse rises. They are waiting, hungry, for your reaction. That reaction is the food they came looking for. Your anger validates them. Your tears empower them. Your defensive words give them more material to work with. Every response you give them that comes from a place of emotion is another stone they can use to build a wall against you. But silence? Silence is disorienting. Silence gives them nothing to grab onto. Silence says, without using a single word, that you exist on a different frequency than the one they are broadcasting on. There is a specific kind of silence that the Stoics practiced. Not the cold, punishing silence of someone who is suppressing rage and about to explode. Not the silence of someone who has shut down and gone numb. The Stoic silence is warm, clear, and deeply intentional. It is the silence of someone who has so thoroughly considered their values that words, in that moment, feel unnecessary. It is the silence that communicates presence, not absence. And when you finally do speak, and sometimes you will speak, because Stoicism is not about becoming a stone, what comes out of your mouth will carry a weight that no amount of shouting could produce. Because you did not rush. Because you chose. And because the person in front of you, somewhere deep down, will feel the difference. The third thing you need to understand is that your response is always a choice, even when it does not feel like one. This is the hardest part. It is easy to believe, in the middle of a provocation, that you have no choice. That what you feel is what you must express. That the anger rising in your chest is something that simply happens to you, like weather, like gravity. The Stoics disagree. Not because they were emotionless robots. Epictetus felt anger. Marcus Aurelius felt frustration. Seneca felt grief so heavy it nearly broke him. They were not people who did not feel. They were people who refused to be controlled by what they felt. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the Nazi concentration camps and lost nearly everyone he loved, described this space as the place where human freedom lives. The Stoics built their entire philosophy inside that space. They understood that the feeling is not the problem. The feeling is just a signal. What matters is what you do with it, and that is always, in every situation, without exception, your choice. When you internalize this, the person trying to provoke you loses their most important tool. They can still create the stimulus, but they no longer control the response. And without control of your response, they have no power over you at all. They are pushing a door that no longer opens from their side. The fourth thing to understand is that you must know your values before the moment of provocation arrives. Most people walk into conflicts unprepared. They have never sat down and asked themselves the most basic and important questions: what do I stand for? What will I never compromise? What kind of person do I want to be at my worst moment, when everything in me wants to behave differently? Without answers to these questions, you will always be vulnerable. Because without a compass, any strong wind can push you off course. The Stoics were obsessive about this. They would meditate on their values not just in quiet mornings, but in the middle of difficult situations, because they understood that a value only becomes real when it is tested. It is easy to be patient when nothing is pressing you. It is easy to be kind when everyone around you is kind in return. The character test, the real one, always comes in the moment when everything in you wants to react, when every primitive instinct is screaming at you to strike back, to defend, to prove. In that moment, the person who has done the internal work will find a stillness they can reach for. It will not be perfect. It will not feel effortless. But it will be there, like a root system beneath the storm. And that is what separates the person who walks away from provocation with their dignity intact from the one who handed away their peace for a moment of release. The fifth thing to understand is that staying calm is not about controlling the other person, it is about returning to yourself. This is a shift in focus that changes everything. Many people try to stay calm because they want to look calm. They want to appear unaffected. They are, in other words, still performing for the audience of the person who provoked them. And that performance is exhausting and ultimately unstable, because it is still rooted in how the other person sees you. Stoic calm is different. It is not performed. It is returned to. There is a version of you that exists beneath the noise, beneath the triggered reactions, beneath the ego that needs to win every argument. That version is quieter, older in some way, less interested in the drama and more interested in the direction. And every time someone provokes you, the Stoic practice is simply to return to that version, to come back to the ground of who you are, to let the noise pass over you and reclaim the center that belongs to you. Marcus Aurelius described this as returning to yourself like a soldier returning home after battle. Not because the battle was not real. Not because it did not affect you. But because home, your own inner stillness, is always waiting for you, and it is always more important than the war. The sixth understanding is about what you say when you finally do speak. After the silence. After the return to yourself. After the moment has settled enough that you are no longer reacting from your wounds. What do you actually say? The Stoics were not advocates of permanent silence. They believed in speech, precise, truthful, deliberate speech. But they also believed that words spoken in anger are almost never the words you actually mean. And they almost never produce the outcome you actually want. So when you speak, after provocation, the Stoic speaks from observation, not from injury. Instead of saying what the provocation made you feel, which usually comes out as accusation, which then starts a cycle, the Stoic names what is happening. Calmly. Without theater. Often a single sentence is enough. Sometimes just a look carries more than a paragraph ever could. And occasionally, not always, but occasionally, the most powerful thing you can say to someone who has tried to destabilize you is something so unexpected, so gentle, so devoid of the reaction they were hoping for, that it stops them completely. Not because you have outsmarted them, but because you have refused to become what they needed you to become. The seventh thing to understand is that provocation is often the last resort of someone who cannot reach you any other way. When someone provokes you, consider for a moment what they are admitting. They are admitting that rational conversation was not an option they felt they could take. They are admitting that they needed to go around your reasoning and target your emotions instead. In other words, they have already told you, by the very act of provocation, that they do not have the tools to engage you as an equal. They need you to descend. The Stoic response to this recognition is not contempt. It is not superiority. It is something much more quietly powerful. It is compassion. Not the warm, comfortable compassion of someone who feels safe. The clear-eyed compassion of someone who sees that the person in front of them is struggling with something they have not yet learned to handle in a better way. This kind of compassion does not excuse the behavior. It does not invite more of it. But it stops the behavior from landing in you and taking root. Because you understand what it is, and understanding removes the sting. The eighth thing to understand is that your inner narrative is the battlefield, not the room you are standing in. What the Stoics understood, and what modern psychology is only now beginning to catch up to, is that the real provocation is never the words said to you. The real provocation is the story you tell yourself about those words. The same sentence, delivered to two different people, can shatter one of them and leave the other completely undisturbed. The difference is never the sentence. The difference is the inner narrative. If your narrative is that your worth depends on what others think of you, then someone questioning your worth becomes catastrophic. If your narrative is that conflict means something is fundamentally wrong, then someone bringing conflict becomes a threat to your entire reality. But if your narrative is rooted in the Stoic understanding that other people's opinions are outside your control, and that your value comes not from what others say but from how you choose to act, then the words can still arrive, but they do not find anywhere to live. The Stoics practiced this narrative work constantly. They called it prosoc, close attention to yourself. They would examine their own assumptions, their automatic reactions, their hidden beliefs, and they would test them the way a scientist tests a hypothesis. Is this belief actually true? Does this reaction serve me? Does this story I am telling myself lead me toward the person I want to be, or away from them? This is not passive work. It is some of the most demanding inner work a human being can do. But it is also the work that makes everything else possible. The ninth thing to understand is that you will not do this perfectly, and perfection was never the goal. One of the misunderstandings about Stoicism that prevents people from embracing it is the idea that it demands perfection. That the Stoic never loses their temper, never says something they regret, never gets pulled into the very reaction they were trying to avoid. This is not Stoicism. This is a fantasy. Every Stoic philosopher, including the ones we study today, wrote honestly about their failures. Seneca wrote letters describing moments when he reacted poorly, when his words came out sharp instead of clear, when the heat of a moment got inside his armor. Marcus Aurelius wrote journal entries full of self-correction. Epictetus, whose early life was spent in slavery and whose body was permanently damaged by his master's cruelty, was not a serene statue. He was a man who had learned, through tremendous suffering, to choose differently. The goal of Stoic practice is not to become someone who is never triggered. The goal is to close the gap between the trigger and the response. To make that gap a little wider, a little more spacious, a little more filled with your own conscious presence, until one day, the space is wide enough that your worst impulse never quite reaches your mouth. Progress, not perfection. That is the actual Stoic promise. The 10th thing to understand is that how you handle provocation tells you more about yourself than about the person who provoked you. This is the reflection that the Stoics return to again and again, because it transforms every conflict into a classroom. The person who provoked you has shown you something. But what you do with that provocation shows you something about yourself that nothing else quite can. It reveals your triggers, your unhealed places, your hidden assumptions, your current relationship with your own peace. Think about the last time someone truly got under your skin. What was it that they touched? What was it about that specific thing that made it land the way it did? Not their intention. Their intention tells you about them, but your reaction. What does your reaction tell you about you? If someone calls you stupid and it bounces off, it is often because you are genuinely secure in your own intelligence. If it stings, it might be revealing a fear you carry about being seen as inadequate. The sting itself is information. And the Stoic does not run from that information. They sit with it. They ask it questions. They allow it to become the lesson that makes the next provocation a little less powerful. In this way, every person who tries to provoke you becomes, almost in spite of themselves, one of your greatest teachers. Not because they are wise, but because they are holding up a mirror. And if you are brave enough to look into it, you will see something that makes you stronger. The 11th thing to understand is that the way you respond to provocation is a form of leadership, whether you intended it to be or not. You may not think of yourself as a leader. You may not be managing a team or standing in front of an audience. But every single interaction you have in a day is a form of influence. The people around you, your children, your partner, your colleagues, your friends, the strangers watching what happens in a public moment, they are all watching. And what they are watching for, even unconsciously, is how you behave when it is hardest to behave well. This is the most contagious thing in any room, not the conflict itself, not the provocation, but the response. When one person responds to aggression with calmness, it changes the atmosphere. It gives everyone else present permission to do the same. It introduces a different possibility into the space. And over time, if you are the person who consistently responds this way, it changes the culture of every environment you inhabit. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about virtue as a social act. Your inner discipline is not a private thing. It radiates. It sets a tone. It becomes a kind of quiet invitation for everyone around you to choose better too. And that is a form of power that no amount of aggression or retaliation could ever match. The 12th thing to understand is that some provocations deserve no response at all, not because you are weak, but because you are done. There is a moment in every Stoic's life where they realize that not every battle deserves their attention. Not every provocation is a call to engage. Some of them are invitations to a circus that has nothing to do with where you are going. And the most powerful response to those invitations is simply to decline. This is not avoidance. Avoidance comes from fear, from not wanting to face something. The Stoic decision to not engage is different. It comes from clarity, from having seen the situation fully and determined that no good comes from entering it. The Stoics called this discernment, and they considered it one of the highest expressions of wisdom. Knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Knowing when to engage and when to walk away. Knowing the difference between a situation that deserves your energy and one that would simply drain it. When you exercise this discernment, the provocateur loses something they rarely expected to lose. They lose even the dignity of a reaction. And in that absence, they are left alone with whatever drove them to provoke in the first place. Which is ultimately where the work was always supposed to happen for them. The 13th thing is that your peace is not something to be defended, it is something to be returned to. Language matters. When you think of your inner peace as something to be defended, you are already at war. You are already in a defensive posture, scanning for threats, bracing for impact. But when you think of it as a home you can always return to, a place that exists independently of whatever is happening around you, then no one can threaten it, because no one can reach it. They can only temporarily pull your attention away from it. This is the deepest Stoic insight about provocation. The person who tries to disturb your peace cannot actually touch your peace. They can only succeed in making you forget it is there. And the entire practice, all the silence, all the inner work, all the value clarification, it is all just practice in remembering. Practice in finding your way back to the center, faster and faster, until the center becomes your default. Not a destination. A home. And no matter how far the storm carries you, you always know the way back. The 14th thing to understand is that time is always on the side of the person who stays calm. In the heat of provocation, it never feels this way. In the moment, the person losing their composure seems to be winning. They are louder, more intense, more present. They seem to be filling the room with power. But watch what happens in the hours, days, and years that follow. The person who reacted will be revisiting the moment, often with regret. They will be managing the consequences of what they said. They will be carrying the weight of a reputation that was built in a split second. And the person who stayed calm? They have moved on. They have taken whatever lesson the moment offered and walked forward with it. The room may have been surprised in that moment. But time has a way of revealing what actually happened. And what actually happened is that one person allowed their peace to be stolen, and the other person kept theirs. Seneca said it simply, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The Stoic response to provocation is, in part, a recognition that the terrible thing you fear will happen if you do not react almost never actually happens. You do not lose. You do not appear weak. You do not invite more cruelty. You invite, instead, a different kind of response from the world. The world begins to see you as someone worth reckoning with. Not because you fought, but because you did not need to. The 15th thing to understand is that equanimity is not indifference, it is the highest form of engagement. One of the most common misreadings of Stoicism is the idea that it calls you to disengage from life. To feel nothing. To care about nothing. To become a kind of human stone. The Stoics would find this reading almost amusing, because it is almost the exact opposite of what they taught. Equanimity, the calm, steady state that the Stoic cultivates, is not distance. It is presence. It is the ability to be fully in a moment, fully engaged with what is happening, without being dragged around by it. Think about the best parent you have ever known. They are fully present with their child. They feel the joy, the frustration, the love, the worry. But they are not swept away by any of it to the point of losing their judgment. The calm they bring to a child's crisis is not coldness, it is the deepest form of love. It says, I am here. I see you. And I am not afraid of this. That is the Stoic engagement with life. Fully in it. Deeply moved by it. And yet, somehow, also above it, in the sense of having a perspective that the moment cannot take away. When someone provokes you, the Stoic response is not to step back from the relationship, the situation, the moment. It is to step deeper into yourself, so that what you bring to the moment is your best self rather than your most wounded one. The 16th thing is that the words you choose to say, or not say, have a history and a future far beyond the moment. When you respond to provocation with aggression, those words land somewhere. They land in the body of the person who received them. They land in the memory of everyone who witnessed them. They land in your own record, the story that others will tell about who you are. And they land in your own sense of self, because we are not only shaped by what happens to us. We are shaped by what we do. Words spoken in anger almost never accurately represent what we actually believe, what we actually want, or who we actually are. They are compressed, heat-distorted versions of something real that got corrupted in the fire of the moment. And yet they are the words that get remembered. The words that get repeated. The words that define a reputation or end a relationship. The Stoic chooses words slowly. Not because they are unsure of themselves, but because they are sure enough to wait. They know that the sentence they deliver from a place of peace will always be truer, sharper, and more lasting than the one delivered from a place of reaction. And they are willing to endure a moment of silence, even an uncomfortable one, to get there. The 17th thing to understand is that the people who try to provoke you the most are often the most afraid of you. This sounds strange at first. But sit with it. The person who continually attempts to destabilize you, undermine you, diminish you in public, what are they responding to? Not your weakness. Your weakness would not require such sustained effort. They are responding to something they see in you that makes them feel inadequate by comparison. Something in your presence, your steadiness, your quiet confidence, that reminds them of something they have not yet found in themselves. Provocation, in this light, is actually a form of panic. And while you are never responsible for managing another person's panic, that is their inner work to do. Understanding it shifts the way you inhabit the situation. You stop seeing yourself as the target of something hostile. You start seeing yourself as the witness of something frightened. And frightened people, underneath their aggression, are asking for something that aggression in return will never give them. The Stoic does not give them what they are asking for, and does not give them what they are pretending to ask for either. The Stoic simply remains stable, clear, unhurried, and lets that presence speak louder than any sentence could. The 18th thing to understand is that peace is a practice, not a personality type. Some people read about Stoic calm and conclude that it must come naturally to certain kinds of people, the quiet ones, the introverted ones, the people who never seem to get angry in the first place. And then they excuse themselves from the practice, because they have decided that they are not that kind of person. This is one of the most costly mistakes a human being can make. Every Stoic philosopher who documented their practice also documented the fact that it was a practice, which means it required effort, repetition, failure, correction, and renewal. Epictetus was enslaved, physically broken, and raised in conditions that would have given anyone every justification for lifelong bitterness. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire at war, lost children, endured betrayal, and lived in near constant crisis. Seneca was exiled, recalled, forced into the service of a tyrant, and eventually ordered to die by the very emperor he had tutored. These were not naturally peaceful people in naturally peaceful circumstances. They were people who had chosen, repeatedly and under enormous pressure, to practice peace. And the practice worked not because it was easy but because it was consistent. You do not need to be born calm. You need to begin, today, in whatever moment you are in, practicing the return. Each time you feel the pull to react and choose differently instead, even if just slightly, even if imperfectly, you are building something. You are building a self that cannot be taken from you. The 19th thing to understand is that the Stoic does not suppress emotion. The Stoic processes it differently. Suppression and Stoic calm are not the same thing, and confusing them will cause real harm. Suppression says, I feel this, and I am going to push it down, ignore it, and pretend it is not there. Stoic processing says, I feel this, and I am going to acknowledge it, examine it, understand what it is telling me, and then decide, consciously, what to do with it. The first approach builds pressure. The second builds wisdom. And the difference is everything. When you are provoked and you feel the rise of anger, the heat in your chest, the tightness in your jaw, the sudden narrowing of your focus. The Stoic does not deny that feeling. They turn toward it with curiosity rather than alarm. What is this? What is it responding to? What does it tell me about what I value? What does it tell me about where I am still vulnerable? And having asked those questions, they make a choice about what happens next. Not from the heat. From the inquiry. This is why Stoic practice, done correctly, actually leads to a richer emotional life, not a flatter one. Because you are no longer afraid of what you feel. You are no longer running from it or drowning in it. You are working with it, the way a master craftsman works with difficult material, not fighting the grain, but understanding it well enough to shape something beautiful from it. The 20th understanding is perhaps the most important of them all, and it is simply this: you have already survived every difficult moment of your life so far. Every time someone has tried to break you, belittle you, provoke you, diminish you, you are here. You are reading this. You made it through. And not only did you make it through, but each time you navigated one of those moments, even imperfectly, even messily, you took something from it. Some small piece of knowledge about yourself, about what you are made of, about what you can bear. The Stoics believed that difficulty was not an obstacle to a good life. It was the path to one. Not because suffering is beautiful, but because the response to suffering, when chosen consciously, builds something that ease and comfort cannot build. It builds the kind of character that cannot be taken from you. The kind that walks into any room and does not need the room's approval. The kind that can be provoked and still remember who it is. That is what all of this is for. Not to make you invulnerable. Not to make you cold. To make you so deeply rooted in yourself that when the wind comes, and it will always come, you bend but do not break. You move, but you come back. You feel, but you choose. Here is something worth pausing on before we go further, something this space is built around. This content exists because of a belief, a simple, serious belief, that the ideas we carry inside us shape the life we actually live. And the reason to subscribe to this channel is not for entertainment, though there is that too. It is because what you fill your mind with matters more than almost anything else you will decide today. The Stoics understood this. Their entire practice began not in a moment of conflict, but in the quiet choices made before conflict arrived, the books read, the ideas absorbed, the values clarified in private so they could be lived in public. Every video on this channel is built with the same intention: to give you something that holds its shape under pressure. Not to tell you what to think, but to give you better tools for thinking. Not to promise you an easy life, but to help you build the kind of inner foundation that makes any life livable. These ideas are old, but they are not dusty. They are exactly what the modern world most desperately needs, and most rarely provides. If you have found something true in these words, subscribe. Not as a passive act, but as a declaration: I want more of this. I want to keep building. I want to keep growing. Because the people who find their way to content like this are not here by accident. They are here because something in them already knows that the deeper work is the most important work. And this channel is committed to showing up for that work, consistently, for as long as there are people ready to do it with us. The 21st thing to understand is that what you allow into your mind becomes your default response. This is Stoic psychology at its most practical and most important. The Stoics understood, thousands of years before neuroscience could confirm it, that the mind builds its defaults through repetition. What you practice in thought, you perform in action. What you rehearse in imagination, you replicate in reality. Which means that your behavior in a moment of provocation is not spontaneous. It is the result of every pattern you have built up to that point. If you have spent years rehearsing resentment, replaying slights, imagining revenge, nursing grievances, then your default in a moment of provocation will be to reach for more of the same. Not because you are a bad person. Because you have built that particular road very smooth and very wide, and the mind, under pressure, takes the widest, smoothest road available. But if you spend time, even small amounts of time, consistently, rehearsing the Stoic response, noticing your triggers without acting on them, returning to your values in quiet moments, examining your reactions with curiosity instead of shame, then you are building a different road. A narrower one at first. but one that over time becomes the path your mind reaches for when everything gets difficult. This is why the Stoics considered reading, journaling, and meditation to be as important as anything else in a person's daily practice. Not luxuries. Essentials. Because the mind that is not deliberately cultivated will be cultivated by whatever it encounters by accident. And the world, especially now, is full of things designed to cultivate fear, reactivity, and impulsiveness. The Stoic chooses differently. On purpose. Every day. The 22nd thing is that other people's provocations often reveal your next area of growth. No one wants to hear this, at least not in the moment when someone is actively trying to get under your skin. But it is one of the most consistently true things the Stoics observed, and one of the most practically useful. The thing that provokes you most reliably is almost always the edge of your current development. The place where your practice has not yet fully taken root. The vulnerability that still needs attention. This does not mean the person provoking you is right about you. Often they are not. Often they are projecting, exaggerating, or simply inventing. But even an unfair provocation, one with no truth in it whatsoever, can show you something if you look at your reaction carefully enough. Why did it sting? What story did it activate? What fear did it touch? Handled this way, your worst day with your most difficult person becomes, in retrospect, one of your most clarifying experiences. Not because they did you a favor, but because you refused to waste the material. You took what was meant to wound and turned it into a tool. And that kind of alchemy is one of the most distinctly human things we are capable of. The 23rd thing to understand is that the body is the first battlefield. Before a word is spoken, before a decision is made, before the Stoic mind can engage with what is happening, the body has already responded. Heart rate rising, jaw tightening, breath becoming shallower, hands wanting to move. These are ancient responses, designed not for the modern world of meetings and text messages but for the prehistoric world of physical threat. And they are still running. Full speed. In situations where they are neither helpful nor appropriate. The Stoics understood this. They spoke of the pre-emotions, the first flush of physical response that comes before you have had any conscious experience of it. And they did not condemn these responses or try to eliminate them. They accepted them as part of the nature they had been given. What they worked on was what came after. The space between the physical jolt and the behavioral response. That space, they believed, was where the work happened. Modern breath work, somatic practices, and nervous system regulation techniques are essentially rediscovering what the Stoics practiced through a different vocabulary. When you slow your breath, you give your prefrontal cortex time to come back online. When you feel your feet on the ground, you signal to your nervous system that you are not in physical danger. When you pause before speaking, you create the space in which a different choice becomes possible. The body is not the enemy of the Stoic mind. It is the ground it works from. And learning to work with it, rather than against it, is part of the practice. The 24th thing to understand is that forgiveness is not for the person who wronged you. It is for the person you are trying to become. This is one of the places where Stoicism and popular culture are most deeply at odds. Popular culture tends to treat forgiveness as something you give someone when they have earned it. As a gift that must be deserved. As a sign of the other person's rehabilitation. The Stoics saw it completely differently. For the Stoic, forgiveness, or more accurately, the letting go of resentment, is an act of self-interest in the highest sense. Not because it excuses what was done. Not because it says what happened was acceptable. But because carrying resentment is carrying a weight that belongs to the person who hurt you. You are holding something that is making you smaller, slower, less free, and it was given to you by someone who has already moved on. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is to be unlike the person who harmed you. Not to become colder. Not to become harder. But to refuse to let what was done to you determine who you become in response to it. That refusal, that insistence on remaining whole, is both the Stoic practice of forgiveness and its deepest form of power. The 25th thing to understand is that consistency is more powerful than intensity. Most people who discover Stoicism do so in a moment of crisis. Something has gone wrong. Someone has hurt them. A situation has collapsed. And in that burning moment, they devour everything they can find about how to be stronger, calmer, more resilient. And then the crisis passes, and the practice fades, and the next time something hard arrives, they are back at the beginning. The Stoics were not interested in intensity. They were interested in habit. They believe that who you are is not defined by your best moments or your worst moments, but by your average moment, the one no one is watching, the one that does not feel particularly significant, the one that is just another Tuesday in an ordinary week. Because those moments, accumulated over years, are what build the actual person. So the practice does not need to be dramatic. It does not need to be hours long. It can be a minute in the morning where you remind yourself of your values. It can be a breathe before you respond to a difficult message. It can be a question you ask yourself at the end of the day. Did I act in accordance with who I want to be? Not with shame if the answer is no, but with curiosity. With adjustment. With the quiet commitment to try again tomorrow. Consistency is what turns a philosophy into a life. And a life is always made of small moments, not large ones. The 26th thing to understand is that you cannot control how others see you, only how you see yourself. This is the Stoic teaching that most directly dismantles the power of social provocation. Because most provocations, at their core, are attacks on reputation, on how you are perceived by others. They are attempts to make you look foolish, weak, dishonest, or inadequate in the eyes of an audience. And they are effective only to the extent that you agree that the audience's opinion matters more than your own. The Stoics drew a clear line between what is up to you and what is not. What is not up to you includes the opinions, judgments, and stories others tell about you. What is up to you is your own character, how you actually live, what you actually do, what you stand for in the moments when no one is watching. And that character, built over time, will eventually speak so loudly that no provocation can drown it out. This does not mean you should be indifferent to your relationships or your reputation entirely. We live in community, and community matters. But there is a crucial difference between caring about how you actually are and caring about how you appear. The first keeps you honest and growing. The second makes you a hostage to every person with an opinion. The Stoic chooses the first, and in doing so, discovers a freedom that public approval could never provide. The 27th thing to understand is that true strength does not need to announce itself. There is a particular kind of person in the world who needs everyone to know how strong they are. Who responds to every provocation with a demonstration of power, louder voice, larger presence, more aggressive language. This person believes they are winning every confrontation. But watch them carefully. Their strength is dependent on the audience. Remove the audience, and they become uncertain. Change the audience's reaction, and they become destabilized. Their power is borrowed from other people's fear, and borrowed power is always temporary. The Stoic has no need to announce their strength because they are not performing strength for others. They know it is there. They have tested it, privately, in hundreds of small moments. And because they know, they do not need to show. The composure they bring to a moment of provocation is not theater. It is simply who they are. And that kind of strength, the kind that does not need to perform, is the only kind that lasts. People feel this in you before they can name it. They sense something in the quality of your stillness, in the unhurried pace of your words, in the way you look at them without either aggression or fear. And what they are sensing is the thing that cannot be faked and cannot be taken. The strength of a person who knows who they are. The 20th thing to understand is that every moment is an opportunity to practice, and you will never run out of material. The world, bless it, is inexhaustible in its provision of difficult people and challenging situations. If you have decided to practice Stoic response to provocation, you will never lack for a classroom. The person who cuts you off in traffic. The colleague who takes credit for your work. The family member who knows exactly where to press. The stranger online who has chosen you as today's target. They are all, without knowing it, contributing to your education. The Stoic does not wait for the big moment, the dramatic confrontation, the public humiliation, the major crisis, to practice their philosophy. They practice in the small moments, because the small moments are the practice that makes the large moments possible. Each time you choose patience in a minor irritation, you are strengthening the same muscle you will need when the stakes are genuinely high. Each time you return to your breathe before responding to a frustrating message, you are building the neural pathway that will be there for you when someone is actively trying to destroy your composure. The world is not cruel for giving you so many opportunities. The world is generous, in its way. It gives you exactly what you need to become the person you are choosing to be. The 29th thing to understand is that you are not alone in this struggle. One of the strangest gifts of Stoic philosophy is the community it creates across time. When you read Marcus Aurelius at 2 in the morning wondering how you survived your own life, you are joining a conversation that has been going on for more than 2,000 years. When you feel the familiar heat of being provoked and reach, instead of reacting, for something steadier, you are doing what Epictetus did, what Seneca did, what countless unnamed people in impossible situations have done before you. You are not inventing this. You are inheriting it. And that inheritance carries with it a sense of companionship that cannot be overstated. You are not the only person who has struggled with this. You are not uniquely weak for finding it hard. The hardest human beings who ever lived found it hard. The difference between them and the people who got crushed by it is simply that they kept practicing. And because you are still here, reading this, still asking the questions, that means you are still practicing too. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. The 30th thing to understand is that your calm is contagious. You have probably felt the opposite. The way someone else's anxiety can fill a room, the way one person's anger can tighten the air for everyone present. Emotional states are transmitted between people with remarkable efficiency, long before anyone has said a word. The nervous system reads other nervous systems the way most people read text messages, instantly, automatically, and with significant impact on how the day unfolds. This means your calm is not just personal. It is environmental. When you walk into a tense situation having done your inner work, you carry a different frequency with you. You do not match the agitation in the room, and in not matching it, you give the room permission to shift. Not always. Not immediately. But more often than you might expect. Parents who practice this discover that their calm genuinely reaches their children in a way that neither words nor punishment can. Leaders who practice this find that their teams take cues from their composure in a way that transforms how crises are handled. And ordinary people, in ordinary moments, discover that the way they hold themselves changes what other people feel comfortable doing around them. Your inner life is not private in the way you might assume. It broadcasts. And the Stoic commitment to peace is, among other things, a commitment to broadcasting something worth receiving. The 31st thing to understand is that there will be moments when staying calm requires walking away, and walking away is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. There is a romanticized image of Stoic composure that involves standing completely still and serene in the face of any assault, unmoved as a mountain while everything rages around it. This image is poetic, but it is incomplete. The Stoics also understood that wisdom sometimes looks like knowing when to leave, when a situation is not designed for resolution but only for escalation, when your presence is making things worse rather than better, when the only available choice is between leaving with your peace or staying and losing it. Walking away is not running. Running is fleeing from something you fear. Walking away is choosing, deliberately, to remove yourself from a situation that serves no good purpose. It is the recognition that your presence is a choice, your energy is a resource, and not every provocation deserves either. Knowing the difference between staying because you have decided this moment deserves your attention, and leaving because you have determined it does not, requires exactly the kind of inner clarity that Stoic practice develops. And exercising that choice, calmly and without drama, is often the most powerful move available. The 32nd thing to understand is that every person you admire has been in your position. There is not a single person you look up to, not a mentor, not a historical figure, not a leader, not an artist, who has not been at the exact same crossroads you are at right now. Who has not felt the heat of someone else's provocation and had to decide, in real time, with a pounding heart and a tight chest, what kind of person they were going to be in this moment. What you are attempting is not unusual. What you are attempting is human. And what separates the people who become who they wanted to become from the ones who stay stuck in cycles of reaction is simply the decision, made again and again, in thousands of ordinary moments, to practice differently. The person you admire did not get there by being lucky with their circumstances. They got there by practicing, imperfectly and consistently, the exact thing you are practicing right now. And the fact that it is hard, the fact that it requires effort and humility, and the willingness to fail and try again, that is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. That is a sign that you are doing it. The 33rd thing to understand is that the quality of your life is largely determined by the quality of your response to adversity. Strip away the variables you cannot control, the economy you were born into, the family that shaped you, the challenges that arrived uninvited, and what remains is always the same essential question: what are you going to do with this? Not what does this mean about you? Not whether this is fair. What are you going to do with this? The Stoics were not naive about suffering. They did not pretend it was pleasant or claim that the person experiencing it should simply feel grateful. Seneca said directly that some things that happen to us are genuinely terrible and deserve to be named as such. But he also said that two people can receive the same blow and walk away in opposite directions, one crushed, one strengthened, and that the difference is almost never the blow itself. It is the response. It has always been the response. And the response is always yours to shape. The 34th thing to understand is that integrity under pressure is the only integrity that counts. Anyone can have integrity when it is easy. When nobody is watching, when nothing is at stake, when keeping your values costs you nothing, integrity in those moments is not integrity at all. It is just comfort. Real integrity is what happens when keeping your values costs you something. When you stay calm even though every part of you wants to react. When you refuse to lie even though the truth is embarrassing. When you defend someone who cannot defend themselves even when it would be easier to look away. The Stoics called this virtue, and they considered it the only true good, the one thing that could not be taken from you, that no external force could reduce or remove. Not health, because health can be lost. Not wealth, because wealth can be stolen. Not reputation, because reputation depends on other people's judgments. Only virtue, the choice to act rightly regardless of circumstance, was considered by the Stoics to be truly and permanently yours. And so the moment of provocation, in this light, is not a threat to your integrity. It is the moment when your integrity becomes real. When it moves from belief to practice. When it becomes not just what you say you are, but what you actually are. The 35th thing to understand is that peace, ultimately, is something you build, not something you find. People spend years looking for peace. In relationships, in careers, in locations, in experiences. They believe that when they get to the right place, the right person, the right moment, peace will arrive. The Stoics would say, gently and firmly, that they are looking in the wrong direction. Peace does not arrive from outside. It is constructed, slowly and deliberately, from the inside. From the accumulation of conscious choices. From the practice of return. From the daily decision to be the author of your own inner life rather than its passenger. This does not mean external circumstances do not matter. They do. But they are, as the Stoics understood, ultimately unreliable. They change. They disappoint. They are granted and taken by forces entirely outside your control. The only thing that remains stable, if you have done the work, is the inner structure you have built. And the beautiful, difficult, liberating truth is that this structure is available to you now. Not when the difficult person leaves your life. Not when the situation finally resolves. Not when you finally become the person you are trying to be. Now. In the middle of the provocation. In the middle of the mess. In the most imperfect, unglamorous version of yourself that has ever shown up to face a Tuesday. Peace is here. It was always here. The practice is just in remembering where. The 36th thing to understand is that this is not the end of the road, it is the beginning. Everything in these words points not toward a destination but toward a practice. A way of orienting yourself, daily, toward the life you want to live. And the most important thing about a practice is that it never really ends. There is no moment where you graduate from Stoicism, where you have achieved complete equanimity, where no one can touch you and nothing can move you. What changes over time is not that you become invulnerable. What changes is that you become more skilled at the return, more practiced at finding the center, more familiar with the landscape of your own reactions so that you can navigate them with greater agility, and more genuinely at home in yourself, in the deep, quiet way that has nothing to do with how the day is going and everything to do with who you are choosing to be inside it. That is the Stoic promise. Not a perfect life. A lived one. Not an absence of difficulty. A presence inside difficulty that remains, stubbornly and beautifully, your own. The 37th thing to understand is that the world needs this from you more than you know. We live in a time of extraordinary noise. Social media is built, architecturally, to provoke, to generate the reactions that keep people engaged and returning. News cycles are designed around outrage. Public discourse has largely become a competition to see who can be more offended, more reactive, more performatively upset. And in the middle of all of this, a person who responds differently, calmly, deliberately, with genuine reflection rather than reflex, stands out not as cold or strange but as something the world is desperately hungry for. You may not be able to change the world's noise level, but you can change your participation in it. You can be the person in your family who does not escalate, the colleague who de-escalates, the stranger online who says something true and measured instead of something cutting. These are small acts, but they ripple. They reach people who did not know they needed what you were offering. And over time, they create a different kind of culture, one response at a time, one choice at a time, one ordinary moment at a time. The world needs more Stoics. Not because Stoicism is perfect, but because the alternative, a world where everyone reacts to everything, where provocation always finds its target, where emotional hijacking is the primary mode of human interaction, is a world none of us actually want to live in. And the 38th and final thing to understand is this: you already know what you need to do. It is possible you have read every word on this page and felt, in some quiet place, a sense of recognition rather than discovery. Because the truth is that the Stoic path is not foreign to you. You have walked it before. Every time you chose patience over anger. Every time you let someone's cruelty pass without responding. Every time you sat with a feeling long enough to understand it before acting on it. Every single time you treated yourself and someone else with more dignity than the moment seemed to require. You have already been practicing. You just may not have had a name for it, or a community around it, or enough reminders that what you are doing matters. This is that reminder. You are capable of this. Not in a motivational sense, in a real sense. In a this has already been demonstrated sense. And every day you continue the practice, every time you reach for stillness instead of reaction, every time you choose the response that comes from the person you are becoming rather than the wounds you are still healing, you are building something that no one can take from you. That is the whole point. That has always been the whole point. And you were already on the way. If any part of what you just read spoke to something real in you, subscribe to this channel, not because it is asked of you, but because you have come too far in your own growth to stop getting fuel for the journey. Every video here is built with one purpose: to give you something that actually holds when life gets hard. That is the commitment. Show up for yours, and this channel will keep showing up for you. Subscribe now. Have you ever felt someone watching you a little too closely? Not with admiration. Not with warmth. But with something colder. Something that does not quite smile when you succeed. Something that asks questions that seem friendly on the surface but carry a strange weight underneath. Something that makes you feel, when you walk away from the conversation, like you just went through something you cannot quite name. That feeling is real. And the questions that come with it are real. And today, we are going to name them one by one, because Friedrich Nietzsche saw them clearly over a century ago, and the philosophy of Stoicism gave us the tools to handle them with grace, power, and unshakable dignity. Stay with this. Because what you are about to read is going to change the way you see certain people in your life, and more importantly, it is going to change the way those people affect you. There is a woman named Clara. She had worked at the same company for 6 years, quietly building her skills, taking on extra responsibilities, showing up early and leaving late without making noise about any of it. She was not the loudest person in the office. She was not the one who announced her ambitions at every meeting. She simply worked, and over time, the work spoke. When she was promoted, the congratulations came from most people warmly and genuinely. But there was one colleague, a woman named Dana, whose congratulations felt different. The words were right, but the face was slightly off. The smile did not reach the eyes. And then, within the same week, the questions began. How did you find out about the promotion before it was announced? Did you have a relationship with the director that others did not know about? Are you sure you are qualified for this level of responsibility? Do you think the timing was a coincidence? How do you think the rest of the team really feels about this? Clara felt it immediately. Each question was wrapped in the language of concern, of curiosity, of friendly interest. But underneath each one was something else entirely. Something that Nietzsche would have recognized without hesitation. Something that the Stoics would have counseled her to understand, name, and refuse to be diminished by. The questions were not about information. They were about erosion. They were designed, not always consciously, because jealousy often operates below the level of conscious intent, to quietly destabilize her confidence, to introduce doubt where there had been none, to reduce her experience of her own success. This is what jealous people do. And they almost always do it through questions. Before we go any further into what those questions are, and why Nietzsche understood them so profoundly, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Because the conversation you are in right now, about jealousy, about Nietzsche, about Stoic philosophy and how it applies to real human dynamics, goes much deeper than a single reading can take you. Every week, this channel brings you content that is built to genuinely change the way you think, the way you respond, and the way you move through a world full of complicated people. Subscribe now, and be part of a community that is choosing wisdom over reaction. Friedrich Nietzsche was one of the most penetrating psychologists who ever lived. He was not primarily a philosopher in the traditional academic sense. He was a diagnostician of the human soul, a man who looked at human behavior without flinching and named what he saw with extraordinary precision and often uncomfortable honesty. He wrote about ressentiment, a French word he used deliberately because it captured something that the English word resentment does not quite contain. Ressentiment, in Nietzsche's sense, is not simply feeling resentful. It is a particular psychological orientation in which a person who feels powerless or inferior redirects that feeling outward, onto the people whose success or qualities they cannot match, and transforms their own inability into a moral judgment against those people. In simpler terms, the person who cannot rise begins to tear down. And the tearing down almost always begins with questions. Nietzsche observed that ressentiment is the psychology of the person who has abandoned the project of self-creation, who has stopped asking how do I become more, and started asking instead why do they have what I do not. He saw it as one of the most destructive forces in human social life, not because it destroys the people it is aimed at, but because it destroys the person who carries it. The jealous person is not primarily a danger to you. They are primarily a tragedy unto themselves. A human being whose energy, which could have been directed toward their own growth and flourishing, has instead been redirected into the corrosive work of monitoring, resenting, and attempting to diminish others. Understanding this is the first step toward the Stoic response to jealousy. And the Stoic response begins not with defensiveness, not with counterattack, not with the kind of wounded reaction that jealous people often secretly hope to provoke, but with something far more powerful. It begins with understanding. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, were unanimous on this point. When you encounter a person who is behaving in a way that seems designed to harm you, the first and most important question is not what do I do about them. The first question is what is driving them. Because a human being who clearly understands what drives another person's behavior is a human being who cannot be easily manipulated by that behavior. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations about the practice of meeting every difficult person with a kind of inner compassion, not the sentimental kind, not the kind that excuses harmful behavior, but the philosophical kind. The kind that says, this person is suffering. Their behavior toward me is an expression of their suffering. And knowing that, I can respond from a position of strength rather than a position of wound. This is the orientation we bring to jealousy. Not naivety. Not the dangerous innocence of someone who cannot see what is happening. But clear-eyed, compassionate, steady understanding, which is, ultimately, far more protective than defensiveness, and far more dignified than retaliation. Now let us talk about the 5 questions. Because naming them is power. And once you have named them, you will never hear them the same way again. The first question that jealous people almost always ask is some version of, how did you manage that? On the surface, this sounds like admiration. It sounds like genuine curiosity about your process, your method, your approach. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that is exactly what it is. The difference between genuine curiosity and jealous questioning is almost entirely in the energy behind it. Genuine curiosity feels light, open, celebratory. It wants you to succeed more. It is genuinely interested in what you discovered so that it can grow alongside you. Jealous curiosity feels heavier. It has a slightly compressed quality. It is looking not to learn but to locate, to find the specific element of luck, coincidence, favoritism, or unfair advantage that it can use to explain away your success in terms that do not require it to acknowledge your effort, your talent, or your discipline. When Dana asked Clara how she found out about the promotion before the announcement, she was not asking about logistics. She was constructing a narrative. A narrative in which Clara's success was not the result of 6 years of consistent, disciplined, unglamorous work, but the result of a special relationship, a lucky circumstance, an inside track that others did not have access to. A narrative that would allow Dana to say to herself, and perhaps to others, that the promotion was not really earned. Nietzsche called this the slave morality of ressentiment. The inability to witness another person's success without immediately searching for the flaw, the advantage, the undeserved element. Because if success can always be explained away by luck or favoritism, then failure can always be explained away as the absence of those things, and the person explaining never has to confront the more uncomfortable truth about why they are where they are. When you hear this question, you do not need to defend yourself. You do not need to provide an exhaustive account of every sacrifice you made, every late night you put in, every difficult moment you pushed through. The Stoic response is to answer with calm simplicity, and let your actual life do the rest of the work. The man or woman who knows what they built does not need to convince anyone of how they built it. Subscribe to this channel if these ideas are resonating with you. Because understanding the psychology of jealousy, and knowing how to stand in your own truth when it is being quietly challenged, is some of the most practically valuable knowledge you will ever develop. This channel is committed to bringing you exactly this kind of depth every week. Subscribe and never miss a conversation that could change the way you navigate your world. The second question jealous people ask is, do you think it will last? This is perhaps the most insidious of the 5, because it is cloaked in the language of concern. It presents itself as caring about you, as being realistic on your behalf, as wanting you to be prepared for the possibility that your current success or happiness or relationship might not be permanent. But pay attention to when this question appears. It appears precisely when you are experiencing something good. Not when you are struggling. Jealous people rarely appear with destabilizing questions when you are going through difficulty, because difficulty does not threaten them. It appears when you are winning. When you are happy? When something has gone right for you in a way that they cannot easily dismiss. Do you think this relationship will last? Do you think the company will actually follow through on this? Do you think you can maintain this kind of success? Do you think people will continue to respond this way? Every one of these questions is designed to do one thing: introduce doubt into your experience of something good. To take the clean, bright energy of a positive moment and cloud it with anxiety about the future. To shift your focus from what is actually happening right now, which is good, to an imagined future in which it has all fallen apart. Epictetus, who had been a slave and who understood human cruelty with a depth that most philosophers can only theorize about, said that the chief task in life is simply this: identify and separate matters so that you can clearly say which externals are not in your control. He taught that the moment you begin to focus your energy on imagined future catastrophes, on all the ways that good things might eventually end, you have surrendered the one thing that is actually yours, this present moment. The jealous person asking, "Do you think it will last?" is, consciously or not, trying to steal your present. Do not let them. The Stoic response is to smile, to nod gently, and to return your full attention to the actual life you are actually living, which is real, and present, and yours. The third question is, who helped you get there? Again, on the surface, this appears to be innocent. Of course, people help each other. Of course, no success is entirely solitary. Acknowledging the people who contributed to your growth and your achievements is a sign of genuine humility and gratitude, and there is nothing wrong with the question itself in the right context. But the jealous version of this question is not really asking about your gratitude or your collaboration. It is systematically dismantling the idea that you did something. It is building a case, piece by piece, acknowledgement by acknowledgement, that your success was not yours. That it belonged to the people who helped you. That you were, at best, a beneficiary of other people's efforts, connections, and generosity. Nietzsche wrote extensively about the psychology of credit, about how the person in the grip of ressentiment cannot tolerate the idea of genuine individual excellence, because genuine individual excellence confronts them with a mirror they do not want to look into. If you succeeded because of who you are and what you did, then their failure to succeed in similar ways says something about who they are and what they did, or did not do. That is a confrontation they will go to considerable lengths to avoid. So they redistribute your success. They populate the story of your achievement with so many other people that you gradually disappear from the center of your own narrative. And if you are not careful, if you have not done the Stoic work of knowing clearly what you actually built and how, you can begin to disappear from your own story yourself. Know what you did. Not arrogantly. Not in a way that dismisses genuine help and genuine collaboration. But with the clear, honest self-knowledge of a person who was actually there, who did the actual work, who made the actual choices. That knowledge is not something anyone can take from you, unless you let them. If you are watching this channel for the first time, this is the kind of conversation that happens here every single week. Deep, honest, psychologically grounded explorations of the ideas that actually matter for how you live. Nietzsche, Stoicism, human psychology, the dynamics of relationships and social environments, all of it, brought together in a way that is practical and real and directly useful to your actual life. Subscribe to this channel. Join a growing community of people who are choosing to understand their world more deeply rather than simply react to it. The fourth question jealous people ask is, are you sure you deserve this? This one is rarely asked directly. It is too naked, too obviously hostile in its direct form. Instead, it comes disguised. It comes as gentle skepticism. As apparently well-meaning concern. As the supposedly neutral observation that others might have been equally qualified, or that the process might not have been entirely fair. To them, of course, not to you. Are you sure the promotion was based on merit and not on politics? Do you think everyone had the same opportunity you had? Are you comfortable with how things went, knowing that some people might have had more to offer? Do you ever wonder if the timing just happened to work in your favor? Every single one of these questions is asking, in language designed to sound reasonable, whether you actually earned what you have. They are whispering, sometimes quite quietly, sometimes with surprising persistence, that perhaps you are an imposter in your own life. That the things you have built and earned and achieved are somehow sitting in the wrong hands. This connects directly to something called imposter syndrome, which is one of the most common psychological experiences among high-achieving people, and which is exacerbated almost beyond description when the people around you are consistently, even subtly, questioning your right to your own success. The jealous person who asks these questions is not diagnosing your inadequacy. They are creating it. Or trying to. The Stoic response to this question requires something that Stoic philosophy considers one of the most fundamental virtues: justice. Not justice in the abstract, legal sense, but personal justice, the clear, honest, unflinching assessment of your own actions, your own effort, your own contribution. A man or woman who has practiced this kind of honest self-assessment, who looks at what they did and evaluates it honestly, neither inflating it out of ego nor deflating it out of false modesty, cannot be shaken by a question about whether they deserve what they have. Because they know. They were there. They did the work. And that knowledge is not available to anyone who is not. Know what you deserve. And let that knowledge be quiet, internal, and completely immovable. The fifth and final question is perhaps the most subtle, and in many ways the most revealing. Jealous people ask, what do people really think of you? This question comes in many forms. Have you noticed how people talk about you when you are not around? Do you think your colleagues actually respect you, or do they just say what you want to hear? What do you think the general consensus is about how you got where you are? I am just asking because I care about you. Do you ever get the sense that people are not entirely genuine with you? What this question is doing, in every single one of its forms, is attempting to insert a gap between you and the people who genuinely like, respect, and support you. It is attempting to make you doubt your relationships, to question the sincerity of your support system, to feel isolated and uncertain in your social world. And if it succeeds, if you begin to pull back from the people who genuinely care about you, if you begin to question their motives, if you begin to walk through your social world with the armor of distrust, then the jealous person has achieved something they could not achieve through direct attack. They have made you smaller by separating you from your community. Nietzsche understood that the most effective weapon of ressentiment is not the direct assault. It is the slow, quiet, persistent work of erosion. The question that plants a seed of doubt. The comment that makes you look at a loyal friend with slightly suspicious eyes. The suggestion, repeated in a dozen different forms, that you are more alone and more disliked than you know. The Stoic defense against this is community, genuine, chosen, deeply trusted community. The Stoics were not advocates of isolation. They were advocates of selective, intentional, high-quality relationship. They counseled choosing your associations carefully, investing deeply in the relationships that were characterized by genuine mutual respect and honesty, and refusing to give weight to the opinions of people who did not share your values. Marcus Aurelius returned constantly, in his meditations, to the people he trusted, the teachers, mentors, and friends who had shown him who they were through years of consistent, honest, generous relationship. These were the people whose opinions mattered to him. Not the court of general public opinion, which he knew to be fickle, shallow, and easily manipulated. Not the voices of people who had demonstrated, through their behavior, that they did not wish him well. When someone asks you what people really think of you, the Stoic answer, given internally to yourself, as a grounding practice, is, the people whose opinions I have earned and whose character I trust think well of me. I know this because I have watched them show me, over time, through their actions. And that is the only measure of social reality that I will allow to count. Subscribe to this channel for more of exactly this. More Nietzsche. More Stoicism. More deep, honest, practically useful psychology for navigating the real social world with clarity, dignity, and power. Every week, this channel adds to a library of content that is specifically designed for people who want to understand themselves and the people around them at a level that actually makes a difference. Subscribe now. The community here is real, the conversations are deep, and what you gain from being part of it compounds over time. Now let us talk about what all 5 of these questions have in common, because understanding their shared structure is what gives you the deepest level of protection against them. All 5 questions are fundamentally about destabilization. They are not seeking information. They are not expressions of genuine curiosity or concern. They are attempts, driven by the questioner's own unprocessed pain, their own unexamined envy, their own abandoned project of self-development, to make you less stable in yourself, less certain of your own experience, less secure in your own success, less connected to the people who actually support you. They are, in Nietzsche's framework, expressions of ressentiment in its most socially sophisticated form. They are the weapons of the person who cannot rise, choosing instead to quietly pull down. And the deepest, most complete response to all of them is not a clever counterargument. It is not a defensive explanation. It is not even a confrontation, though there are times when a clear, calm, direct naming of what is happening is appropriate and necessary. The deepest response is the one that Epictetus pointed toward with everything he wrote, the response of a person who is so thoroughly grounded in their own identity, their own values, their own honest self-knowledge, that destabilization simply is not available as an option. You cannot destabilize a mountain by asking it questions. The work of Stoic philosophy, the daily practice of self-examination, of honest self-assessment, of identifying what is within your control and what is not, of returning always to your own values as the ground on which you stand, is the work of becoming that mountain. Not cold, not indifferent, not closed to genuine human connection, but fundamentally, unshakably stable in yourself. That stability does not come overnight. It is built, the way everything worth having is built, through consistent practice, honest reflection, and the willingness to confront the parts of yourself that are uncomfortable to look at. It is the work of a lifetime. But it begins in a moment, in the decision, made right now, to take yourself and your own inner development seriously. There is also something important to understand about how you respond to jealous people in the moment, because the Stoic approach is not about simply ignoring them or pretending the questions are not happening. The Stoic approach is about responding from a specific quality of inner state, the state of a person who is genuinely secure, genuinely clear, and genuinely compassionate towards someone who is, at their core, suffering. Seneca wrote that we should treat the person who wrongs us not with anger but with something closer to pity, pity not in the condescending sense, but in the genuine sense of recognizing that a person who behaves in harmful ways toward others is living in a kind of inner prison that is its own punishment. The jealous person is not enjoying their jealousy. They are consumed by it. They are spending their days and nights in the uncomfortable company of their own comparison, their own inadequacy, their own awareness of the gap between where they are and where they wish they were. That is not a comfortable way to live. And you, in your steadiness, your clarity, your genuine engagement with the work of becoming the fullest version of yourself, are living in a way that is fundamentally more free, more expansive, and more genuinely satisfying than the contracted, reactive life of ressentiment. Understanding that, holding it as a genuine insight rather than simply a retaliatory thought, is what allows you to respond to jealous questions with something that is simultaneously self-protective and authentically human. You can be clear with yourself about what is happening. You can choose not to be eroded by it. And you can do so without becoming cold, without becoming defensive, without carrying the encounter with you as a wound. Subscribe to this channel. I want to say this with real sincerity. Because the reason this channel exists is not to perform wisdom or to collect views. It is because these ideas, Nietzsche's unflinching psychology, Stoic philosophy's practical tools for inner stability, the genuine exploration of how we actually live and relate to one another, these ideas matter. They change lives when they are taken seriously. They change the way people carry themselves, the way they process difficulty, the way they respond to the complicated social dynamics that are an unavoidable part of being a human being in relationship with other human beings. If what you have been reading today is landing with you, if it is clarifying something that you have felt but not been able to name, if it is giving you a framework for understanding experiences that have been confusing or painful, then you deserve to continue this conversation. Subscribe to this channel. The Stoic response to all of this, and this is where Stoicism and Nietzsche's philosophy converge in a particularly powerful way, is to direct your primary attention to exactly the questions that jealous people are avoiding. Not as a judgment of them, but as a practice for yourself. Ask yourself daily, who am I becoming? Am I moving toward or away from the person I most want to be? What are my actual values, and am I actually living them? What is within my control today, and am I using that control with intention? These questions, practiced consistently, build the kind of inner foundation from which neither jealousy directed at you nor jealousy generated within you can gain meaningful purchase. Because a person who is genuinely engaged with their own becoming, who is pointed toward their own life, their own growth, their own project of authentic self-development, simply does not have the psychological space or the inclination for the contracted, outward-facing orientation of ressentiment. Subscribe to this channel, And let this be the beginning, or the continuation, of exactly that project for you. Every week, content goes up here that is designed to help you ask better questions of yourself. Questions that build rather than erode. Questions that point you toward your own life rather than away from it. Questions rooted in the wisdom of Nietzsche, of the Stoics, of the great thinkers who understood what it means to live with genuine intention and genuine self-knowledge. Subscribe. This conversation is worth continuing. Let us talk for a moment about how you protect your energy in environments where jealousy is present. Because understanding the psychology of jealousy is important, but knowing what to actually do, how to actually move through a social environment that contains one or more jealous people without being diminished by them, is where philosophy becomes genuinely practical. The first and most important thing is to reduce unnecessary disclosure. Jealous people need material to work with. They need information about your successes, your plans, your relationships, your vulnerabilities. The less you provide, not out of paranoia, but out of the Stoic understanding that not every person in your environment has earned access to your inner life, the less they have available to use. Seneca was very clear about this. He did not counsel distrust as a general orientation. He counseled discernment. The recognition that different people in your life merit different levels of access to your genuine self, and that the person who has demonstrated, through their behavior, that they process your good news through a filter of resentment rather than genuine support has, by that demonstration, forfeited the right to know your good news first. This is not coldness. It is wisdom. It is the natural, appropriate adjustment of intimacy in response to demonstrated character. You do not share your deepest hopes with someone who has shown you they will subtly undermine them. You do not announce your achievements to someone who has shown you they will quietly try to explain them away. You protect your inner world by being thoughtful about who has access to it. The second practical tool is to cultivate what we might call Stoic non-reactivity, the trained capacity to receive a destabilizing question without visibly responding to its destabilizing intent. This is not suppression. It is the practiced steadiness of a person who has identified, internally, what is happening, and who has chosen to respond from their values rather than from the automatic reaction of their wound. When someone asks you a question designed to introduce doubt, and you feel that familiar slight constriction in your chest, that subtle defensiveness rising, you do not have to act from it. You can take a breath. You can respond to the surface content of the question without engaging the hostile subtext. You can maintain the expression and energy of a person who is genuinely untroubled, because with practice, with the sustained inner work of Stoic philosophy, that is precisely what you become. Not a person who suppresses. A person who genuinely, actually, is not destabilized by the question, because they know themselves too well, and have built their inner foundation too carefully, for the question to find purchase. That is the goal. And it is achievable. Not immediately, not through reading alone, but through sustained practice of the principles that this channel is dedicated to exploring. Subscribe. Genuinely. Because the practice is ongoing, and the support of a community engaged in the same work is one of the most powerful resources available to you. Every week, new content. Every week, another piece of the conversation. Every week, another opportunity to go a little deeper into the work of becoming exactly the person who cannot be shaken by the small hostilities of people who have abandoned their own becoming. The final thing worth saying about jealous people, and about the 5 questions they ask, is this: they are showing you something. Not about you. About themselves. Every time someone asks you one of these questions, every time they probe for the weak point in your success, introduce doubt about your future, redistribute your credit, question your deservingness, or attempt to separate you from your support, they are revealing, with extraordinary clarity, where they are in their own lives. They are showing you the gap between where they are and where they wish they were. They are showing you the pain of a person who has not yet found the courage to direct their energy toward their own growth. They are showing you what ressentiment looks like from the inside, expressed outward. And knowing that, genuinely knowing it, not as a smug judgment but as a compassionate observation, changes everything about how you experience their questions. They stop feeling like attacks. They start feeling like confessions. They stop eroding your confidence. They start informing your compassion. This is the highest expression of the Stoic response to jealousy. Not the armor of indifference. Not the weapon of retaliation. But the genuine, grounded, philosophically sophisticated response of a person who understands what they are seeing, who can look at a jealous person and think, with real humanity, this person is suffering, and their suffering is being directed at me because I happen to represent something they want but have not yet given themselves permission to pursue. That understanding changes you. It changes the room you walk into. It changes the way you carry yourself in the presence of difficult people. It changes the quality of the life you live, because a person who has moved beyond defensiveness, who has genuinely arrived at the place of understanding and compassion that Nietzsche and the Stoics both pointed toward, from different directions, is a person who is genuinely, freely, fully themselves in every environment they enter. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote that the highest human being is the one who has overcome himself, not other people, not circumstances, not the jealousy and criticism of the crowd, but himself. His own fear, his own resentment, his own abandoned possibilities, his own tendency to look outward when the real work is always inward. The Stoics wrote, across centuries and in different voices, the same essential truth: the life of genuine flourishing is the life directed inward, toward the cultivation of virtue, self-knowledge, and the disciplined expression of your own deepest values, regardless of what the people around you are doing or saying or asking. Both traditions are pointing at the same mountain. The mountain of a self so thoroughly built, so honestly known, so genuinely inhabited, that no question, however carefully designed to destabilize, can move it. That mountain is you. Or it is what you are becoming, one day, one practice, one honest conversation at a time. Subscribe to this channel. Because that becoming is worth supporting, and this is a community that takes it seriously. Every week, the conversation continues. Every week, it goes deeper. Every week, there is something here that is worth your time and your attention, because it is built with exactly your growth in mind. Jealous people will always ask their questions. They will always probe and doubt and redistribute and question and whisper. That is what ressentiment does in the people who have not yet found their way out of it. But you, the person who has read this far, the person who is choosing understanding over reaction, wisdom over wound, you are not one of those people. You are the person who sees the questions for what they are, who stands steady in the face of them, who responds from values rather than vulnerability, and who walks away from every encounter with your own life intact and in your own hands. That is the life Nietzsche pointed toward. That is the life the Stoics built their philosophy to support. That life is yours. Claim it fully. Live it completely. And share this channel with anyone who needs this reminder today. Subscribe now.